The rain in Seattle didn't fall so much as it hovered, a persistent gray mist that clung to the glass walls of St. Jude's Memorial Hospital and seeped into the bones of everyone working the night shift. It was 3:14 a.m. on a Tuesday, the hour when the hospital's hum dropped to its lowest frequency, a time reserved for the exhausted, the dying, and the invisible. On the fourth floor in the cardiac intensive care unit, Alara Vance stood by the window, her reflection ghostly against the dark pane. She was 34, with hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to pull her features into a mask of perpetual neutrality. Her scrubs were a faded navy, washed so many times they had lost their crispness, blending into the shadows of the corridor. To the doctors who rushed past her, to the administrators who checked boxes on spreadsheets, and even to some of the patients who barely registered her presence, Alara was part of the furniture. She was the quiet nurse, the one who didn't speak up in rounds, the one who didn't argue, the one who simply existed to carry out orders, no matter how trivial or how flawed. But tonight the air in the ICU felt different. It was thick with a static charge that had nothing to do with the storm outside. Alara turned from the window, her eyes scanning the room. Bed 4 was occupied by Mr. Henderson, a stable post-op patient recovering from a valve replacement. Bed 6 held Mrs. Gable, who was sleeping peacefully under the soft glow of the monitor. And then there was Bed 1, the trauma bay, empty but prepared. The staff had been told to expect a transfer from the military hospital across town, a high-profile patient whose identity was sealed under layers of bureaucratic confidentiality. No names, no ranks, just a code, VIP Alpha. The attending physician, Dr. Marcus Thorne, had spent the last hour bragging about it in the break room, his voice loud and carrying, ensuring that every nurse and resident heard him. He spoke of connections, of influence, of the kind of case that made careers. He did not speak of care, he spoke of opportunity. Alara adjusted the IV drip on Bed 1, her movements precise, economical. She checked the pressure settings on the ventilator, though it wasn't yet connected. She tested the suction. She aligned the defibrillator paddles. She did all of this without being asked, without being thanked, and without anyone noticing. To Dr. Thorne, she was a shadow. To the head nurse, Brenda, she was a reliable pair of hands that never caused trouble. But Alara saw things others missed. She saw the slight tremor in Thorne's hands when he thought no one was looking. She saw the way he dismissed the concerns of the junior residents. She saw the hierarchy of the hospital not as a structure of healing, but as a ladder of ego, and she knew exactly where she stood on it, at the bottom. And she was fine with that, because being at the bottom meant you could see everything and you could hear everything, and sometimes that was the only way to survive. The double doors at the end of the corridor burst open, shattering the quiet. The sound was like a gunshot in the sterile silence. 2 paramedics rushed in, pushing a gurney with frantic energy. Behind them walked a man in a dark suit, his face grim, flanked by 2 security guards. The atmosphere in the ICU shifted instantly. Nurses froze. Residents looked up from their charts. Dr. Thorne emerged from his office, adjusting his tie, a smile already forming on his lips. This was his moment. The VIP had arrived. Alara stepped back, pressing herself against the wall, making herself small. She watched as the gurney was wheeled into Bed 1. The patient was covered in a heavy thermal blanket, his face obscured by an oxygen mask and a cervical collar. Blood soaked through the bandages on his chest. His vitals were erratic, the monitor screaming a chaotic rhythm that sent a spike of adrenaline through the room. Thorne moved in, taking command, his voice booming with artificial confidence. "Clear the area," Thorne shouted, though no one was in his way. "I need a line now. Get me a central line kit. Someone call anesthesia. We're going to need to intubate immediately." Alara watched the patient's chest rise and fall. It was shallow, ragged. She watched the color of his skin beneath the blood, a pale, waxy gray that signaled shock. She watched the way his fingers twitched against the sheets. And then she saw it. A small, almost imperceptible movement of his left hand, not a spasm. A signal, 3 taps, pause, 2 taps, pause, 1 tap. It was a code, a specific rhythmic pattern that meant nothing to the paramedics, nothing to the security guards, and certainly nothing to Dr. Thorne, who was already barking orders for a scalpel. But to Alara, it was a shout in a silent room. It was a language she hadn't spoken in 10 years, a language she had buried deep beneath the scrub caps and the polite smiles and the deliberate invisibility. Her he. Art hammered against her ribs, a sudden, violent drumbeat. She forced herself to breathe. She forced herself to stay still. Because if she reacted, if she showed that she understood, the fragile peace she had built would shatter. And worse, she might be right, and being right was dangerous. Thorne leaned over the patient, his eyes bright with ambition. "Let's get this chest open. I want to see what we're dealing with. Nurse, hand me the blade. He pointed at Alara. She stepped forward, her hand steady, and placed the scalpel in his gloved hand. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. Thorne saw nothing. He saw a tool. He saw a subordinate. He did not see the woman who had once triaged casualties in a desert sandstorm while mortar fire shook the ground beneath her feet. He did not see the medic who had kept a commander alive for 6 hours with nothing but gauze and willpower. He saw only the quiet nurse. And that was his first mistake. If you are enjoying the tension building in this story, take a moment to hit the like button. It helps us bring these narratives to life and ensures that stories of quiet competence continue to be told. Your support means the world to us. The surgery, or rather the emergency thoracotomy, was a disaster waiting to happen. Thorne worked with speed but not with precision. He was performing for the audience in the room, for the suit standing in the corner, for the future headline he imagined in the medical journals. He cut too deep. He nicked a vessel that should have been avoided. Blood sprayed, bright and arterial, splattering across his gown. Suction, he yelled. More suction. Alara moved. She didn't hesitate. She adjusted the suction tube, clearing the field, her eyes locked on the wound. She saw the tear in the pericardium. She saw the way the heart was struggling to beat against the pressure. And she saw the patient's hand again. Another tap, weak this time, fading. Dr. Thorne, Alara said, her voice low, calm. The bleeding is coming from the left atrial appendage. If you clamp there, you'll restrict flow. You need to approach from the lateral side. Thorne froze. He looked up, his eyes narrowing behind his protective glasses. The room went silent. The resident stopped charting. The suit in the corner tilted his head. Excuse me, Thorne said, his voice dripping with condescension. Did you just give me surgical advice? I'm stating an observation, Alara said, keeping her tone neutral. The anatomy suggests. I know the anatomy, Thorne snapped, cutting her off. I am the surgeon here, you are the nurse. Your job is to hand me instruments and keep the field clear. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do you understand? Alara lowered her eyes. Yes, doctor. She stepped back, she let him proceed. She watched as he clamped the wrong vessel. She watched as the patient's blood pressure plummeted. The monitor screamed a new alarm. Flatline. We're losing him, Thorne shouted, panic edging into his voice. Charge the paddles, clear. He shocked the patient, once, twice. The body jerked, but the rhythm didn't return. Thorne was sweating now, his confidence cracking. He looked around the room, desperate for a scapegoat, for a reason why this perfect opportunity was turning into a nightmare. His eyes landed on Alara. You, he said, pointing a bloody finger at her. You distracted me. You broke my concentration. Get out of this room now. Alara didn't move. She looked at the patient. She looked at the flat line. She knew that if Thorne continued, the man on the table would die. And she knew with a certainty that chilled her blood that this man was not just a VIP. He was someone who mattered, someone who carried a weight she recognized. Doctor, she said, her voice firmer this time. He needs a pericardiocentesis, now, before the tamponade kills him. Thorne's face turned red. Get out, he roared. Security, remove her. 2 guards stepped forward. Alara didn't resist. She stripped off her gloves, dropped them in the biohazard bin, and walked out of the room. She kept her head high, her face blank. But inside, she was counting. She was calculating the seconds until the heart stopped forever, and she was wondering if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Before we continue, if you find yourself rooting for Alara, consider subscribing to the channel. We release new stories every week that explore the hidden strengths of everyday people. Join our community and never miss a moment of redemption. The hallway outside the ICU was cold. Alara leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. She could hear the chaos continuing behind the closed doors, the shouts, the alarms, the frantic running of feet. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her hands. They were trembling, not from fear, but from restraint. It took every ounce of her discipline to stand there and do nothing. 10 years ago, she wouldn't have hesitated. She would have pushed TH. Orn aside, she would have taken control. But 10 years ago, she had learned the cost of visibility. She had learned that in a world built on hierarchy, competence without permission is seen as insubordination, and insubordination gets you killed. Or worse, it gets you erased. She remembered the desert, the heat, the smell of burning diesel and copper. She remembered the unit, the SEALs, the brotherhood that wasn't about rank but about trust. She remembered the day it all ended, the mission that went wrong, the decision she had made to save a civilian child instead of securing the objective, the court-martial that followed, the discharge that wasn't honorable but wasn't dishonorable either. It was administrative, a quiet removal. A whisper in the files that said she was unreliable, a label that stuck to her like tar. She had come to Seattle to disappear, to become no one, to heal wounds that weren't physical, and for 3 years it had worked. She was Alara Vance, the quiet nurse, the one who didn't cause trouble, the one who was ignored, and she had found a strange peace in that invisibility, until tonight. The doors to the ICU opened. Dr. Thorne stepped out, stripping off his bloody gown. He looked shaken, but he was masking it with anger. He saw Alara standing there. "You're fired," he said, his voice low and venomous. "Don't bother coming back. I'm calling HR. I'm filing a report for insubordination and endangerment. You're done, Vance." Alara looked at him. She didn't say anything. She didn't beg. She didn't argue. She simply nodded. "Understood," she said. She walked past him toward the locker room. She could feel the eyes of the other nurses on her. Some looked sympathetic. Most looked relieved that it wasn't them. Brenda, the head nurse, caught her eye. Brenda shook her head slightly, a gesture that said, "I told you to keep your head down." Alara didn't blame her. In this hospital, survival was about compliance, and Alara had failed the test. Or so they thought. As Alara walks away from her career, take a second to comment below. Have you ever been punished for trying to help? Share your story in the comments. We read every single one, and your experiences help shape the themes of our future scripts. In the locker room, Alara changed out of her scrubs. She folded them neatly and placed them in her bag. She washed her face, looking at her reflection in the mirror. She looked tired, older than her 34 years, but her eyes were clear. She knew what was happening in that ICU. She knew that Thorne was failing, and she knew that the patient, the man with the tapping fingers, was running out of time. She couldn't leave, not yet. She put on her street clothes, a simple gray sweater, jeans, boots. She slung her bag over her shoulder and walked out of the locker room. She didn't go to the exit. She went to the stairwell. She took the stairs up to the 5th floor to the administrative wing. She knew the layout of the hospital better than anyone. She knew the blind spots in the security cameras. She knew which doors were propped open for ventilation. She moved like a ghost, silent and unseen. She reached the observation deck above the ICU. It was a small glass-walled room used for teaching rounds. Usually it was empty at this hour. Tonight it was occupied. The man in the suit was there. He was watching the scene below through the glass, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. Alara entered the room. The man didn't turn around. "You're the nurse," he said. His voice was gravelly, authoritative. "Yes," Alara said. "You were removed." "Because I tried to save his life," Alara said, "and Dr. Thorne didn't like being corrected." The man turned then. He was older, perhaps in his 50s, with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much. He studied Alara. He didn't look at her uniform. He looked at her posture, her stance, the way she held herself. "Who are you?" he asked. Alara hesitated. This was the moment, the crossroads. If she lied, she could walk away. She could start over in another city, another name, but if she told the truth, she risked everything. Again. "My name is Alara Vance," she said, "but that's not what you're asking." The man raised an eyebrow. "No, it's not." Alara took a deep breath. "I was a corpsman attached to DEVGRU 10 years ago." The man's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. "DEVGRU? That's a bold claim." "It's not a claim," Alara said. "It's a fact. Check the records. Look for call sign Wraith." The man stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he turned back to the window. Below them, the code blue team was still working. Thorne was shouting. The patient was still flatlining. "Wraith," the man murmured. "I heard that name once, in Kandahar. They said she was a ghost, that she could keep a man alive when God had already left the room." "I'm not a ghost," Alara said. "I'm just a nurse." "No," the man said. "You're not, and if why? Or who you say you are, then you're the only person in this building who can save him." Alara looked down at the chaos. She saw Thorne preparing for another shock. She saw the futility of it. "He has cardiac tamponade," Alara said. "Thorne is treating it like a standard arrest. He's missing the fluid buildup. If he doesn't drain it, the heart can't fill. Shocking him is useless." The man nodded. "Then go down there." "I was fired," Alara said. "If I step foot in that ICU, security will tackle me." The man smiled. It was a cold, hard smile. "Not if I tell them not to." He pulled out his phone. He made a call. "This is Director Holloway. Open the ICU doors for Nurse Vance. Anyone who stops her answers to me. Do you understand?" He hung up, he looked at Alara. Go. Alara didn't hesitate, she ran. We are approaching the climax of the story. If you are on the edge of your seat, please share this video with a friend who loves a good underdog story. Help us spread the word about the power of quiet competence. Alara burst into the ICU. The room fell silent. Thorne looked up, his face a mask of rage. "What are you doing here?" he shouted. "Security." "Stand down," a voice boomed from the doorway. Director Holloway stepped into the room, followed by 2 hospital security guards, but they weren't looking at Alara, they were looking at Thorne. "Director," Thorne stammered, "she's fired, she's insubordinate." "She is consulting," Holloway said, his voice icy. "On my authority, step aside, doctor." Thorne hesitated. He looked at Holloway, then at Alara. He sneered. "This is absurd. She's a nurse. She has no surgical training." "She has more field trauma experience than you have had hot dinners," Holloway said. "Now step aside, or I will have you escorted out." Thorne stepped back, his face purple with humiliation. He crossed his arms, waiting for Alara to fail, waiting for her to make a mistake that would justify his anger. Alara moved to the table. She didn't look at Thorne, she didn't look at Holloway, she looked at the patient. She placed her hands on his chest. She felt the muffled heart sounds. She confirmed the distended neck veins. She confirmed the hypotension. "Needle," she said. "Large bore, 14 gauge. A resident handed it to her, his hands shaking. Alara took it. She cleaned the site. She located the subxiphoid angle. And then, with a steadiness that defied the chaos of the room, she inserted the needle. She advanced it slowly, upward toward the heart. The room held its breath. She felt the pop, the entry into the pericardial sac. She attached the syringe, and then she pulled back. Blood, dark venous blood filled the syringe, 50 milliliters, 60, 70. And then on the monitor a blip, a sinus rhythm, weak but there. Again, Alara said, "Keep draining." She continued to pull back the fluid. With every milliliter, the patient's blood pressure rose. The heart rate stabilized. The color began to return to his skin. After 2 minutes, Alara withdrew the needle. She taped the site. She stepped back. "He's stable," she said. "For now, he needs a pericardial window, surgically, but the immediate threat is gone." The room was silent. The only sound was the steady, rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. Beep, 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 a song of life. Thorne stared at the monitor. He looked at Alara. He looked at Holloway. He had no words. His arrogance had been punctured, just like the pericardial sac. Holloway walked over to the patient. He looked at the man's face. He reached out and gently touched his shoulder. "Commander," Holloway said softly, "you're safe." The patient's eyes fluttered open. They were hazy, unfocused. He looked around the room. He saw Holloway. He nodded slightly. Then his eyes drifted to Alara. He studied her. He squinted. And then a faint smile touched his lips. "Wraith," he whispered. Alara felt a lump in her throat. She nodded. "Yes, Commander." The patient closed his eyes again, but his hand moved. He reached out weakly toward her. Alara took it. She held it. And in that moment, the hierarchy of the hospital dissolved. There were no doctors, no nurses, no directors. There was only the bond of those who had served, those who had survived. If this moment gave you chills, please hit the subscribe button. We have many more stories of hidden heroes and unexpected reunions coming soon. Don't miss out on the next chapter. The aftermath was swift and brutal, for Dr. Thorne anyway. Director Holloway didn't yell, he didn't scream, he simply pulled out a tablet and began to document. He recorded the timeline, he noted the vital signs before and after Alara's intervention. He interviewed the residents, he interviewed the paramedics, and he interviewed Thorne. Thorne tried to defend himself. He talked about protocol, about hierarchy, about the danger of allowing unlicensed personnel to perform procedures, but Holloway cut him off. "Dr. Thorne, Holloway said, his voice calm but deadly. "You were treating a patient with cardiac tamponade using ACLS protocols for ventricular fibrillation. You ignored the clinical signs. You ignored the advice of a qualified medical professional, and you nearly killed a United States Navy SEAL commander. Do you understand the gravity of that?" Thorne paled. A SEAL. "Commander James Sterling," Holloway said. "One of the most decorated operators in the service, and you treated him like a checklist." Holloway turned to Alara. "Nurse Vance, your actions saved his life. You acted within your scope of practice as defined by emergency exemption laws. You demonstrated superior clinical judgment. You are hereby reinstated, effective immediately. Alara nodded. Thank you, Director. And Holloway continued, turning back to Thorne. Dr. Thorne, your privileges at St. Jude's are suspended pending a full review by the medical board. I am recommending revocation. You will be escorted from the premises. Do not return. Thorne looked around the room, hoping for support. But the residents looked away. The nurses stared at the floor. He was alone. His power, built on fear and title, had evaporated the moment he failed to save the patient. He was stripped of his gown, his badge, and his dignity. He walked out of the ICU, not with the swagger of a chief surgeon, but with the shuffle of a defeated man. When he was gone, the room exhaled. The tension broke. The residents looked at Alara with new eyes, not with pity, not with indifference, but with respect. Brenda, the head nurse, stepped forward. She looked at Alara, tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, Brenda said. I should have backed you up. Alara shook her head. You did what you had to do to survive, I understand. No, Brenda said. I didn't, I was afraid, but you were. Alara smiled. It was a small, sad smile. I was terrified, but I knew what I had to do. Take a moment to reflect on the theme of this story. How often do we judge people by their titles rather than their actions? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your insights add depth to our community discussions. The next few hours were a blur of paperwork and debriefings. Alara sat in Holloway's office, drinking coffee from a styrofoam cup. Commander Sterling was in surgery, undergoing the pericardial window procedure. He was expected to make a full recovery. Holloway sat across from her. He looked tired but satisfied. Why did you leave? He asked. The service, why did you let them push you out? Alara looked into her coffee. It wasn't just them, it was me. I made a choice. I chose a life over a mission, and in that world, that's a sin. Holloway nodded. Sterling told me. He said you saved his daughter in Kabul. Alara looked up, surprised. He knows. He knows everything, Holloway said. He's been looking for you for 10 years. He never forgot. When he was injured in the training accident last week, his first request was to be transferred to St. Jude's. He knew you worked here. He wanted to see you, but he didn't want to interfere. He wanted to see if you were still you. Alara felt a wave of emotion wash over her. Relief, gratitude, vindication. He tapped the code, Alara said. 321, Wraith. Yes, Holloway said. He was testing you and you passed. Alara shook her head. I didn't do it for the test. I did it because it was right. That's why he trusts you, Holloway said. That's why we all should. As the sun begins to rise over Seattle, signaling a new day for Alara, please consider liking this video. Your engagement helps us continue to produce high-quality, emotionally resonant content. Thank you for being part of our journey. The morning light filtered into the ICU, soft and golden. The storm had passed. The hospital was waking up. The day shift was arriving, bringing with it the usual noise and chaos. But in bed one there was peace. Commander Sterling was awake. He was sitting up, looking stronger. Alara stood by his bed, checking his vitals. Morning, Commander, she said. Morning, Wraith, he said. His voice was rough but warm. Or should I call you Alara? Alara is fine, she said. Alara, he said, thank you. You don't have to thank me, she said. It's my job. No, Sterling said. It's more than that. You came back after everything. You came back. Alara looked at him. I couldn't let you die. Sterling smiled. I knew you wouldn't, that's why I tapped. He reached out and took her hand. You're not invisible, Alara, not to me, not to anyone who matters. Alara felt a tear slide down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly. I'm just a nurse, she said. No, Sterling said. You're a hero, and it's time you started acting like one. The story of Alara Vance is a reminder that true strength often hides in plain sight. If this narrative resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the yogadist voices have the most important things to say. In the weeks that followed, things changed at St. Jude's. Dr. Thorne was stripped of his license. The investigation revealed a pattern of negligence and arrogance that had been ignored for years. The hospital implemented new protocols for handling high-acuity patients. And Alara was promoted, not to a management position, not to a desk job, but to lead trauma nurse, a role that recognized her skills, her experience, and her judgment. But more importantly, the culture changed. The residents listened to the nurses. The doctors asked for opinions. The hierarchy softened, because everyone had seen what happened when ego replaced competence, and everyone had seen what happened when humility saved a life. Alara still wore her faded navy scrubs. She still kept her hair pulled back tight. She still didn't speak much in rounds, but when she did speak, people listened. They leaned in. They respected her, not because of her title, but because of her actions. And Commander Sterling, he recovered fully. He visited Alara every week, not as a patient, but as a friend. They talked about the old days, about the desert, about the choices they had made, and about the future. One day, Sterling brought her a gift, a small wooden box. Inside was a pin, a silver trident, the insignia of the SEALs. "For you," he said, "honorary, you earned it." Alara held the pin. It was heavy, solid, real. "I'm not a SEAL," she said. "No," Sterling said. "You're something better. You're the one who brings us home." Alara pinned it to her scrub top. It gleamed in the light, a symbol of her past, of her pain, of her redemption. She looked at Sterling. "Thank you." "No," he said. "Thank you, Wraith." We are nearing the end of Alara's journey. If you have enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel. We have a whole library of narratives about justice, competence, and the triumph of the human spirit. Join us for the next adventure. The final scene of this chapter of Alara's life took place on a rainy Tuesday, much like the one where it began. But this time, the rain felt cleansing, washing away the dust of the past. Alara stood by the window in the ICU. She looked out at the city, at the lights, at the life moving below. She was no longer invisible. She was seen, not for her uniform, not for her silence, but for her soul. She turned back to the room. Her patients were stable, her team was strong, and she was ready, ready for the next crisis, ready for the next challenge, ready to be the quiet force that held the line when everything else fell apart. Because that's who she was, that's who she had always been, and finally the world knew it. As we close this story, take a moment to appreciate the unsung heroes in your own life. The nurses, the teachers, the caregivers, who is your quiet hero? Tell us in the comments. Let's celebrate them together. The narrative of Alara Vance is fictional, but the themes are real. In every hospital, in every workplace, in every community, there are people who are underestimated, people who are ignored, people who are mocked. But when the crisis comes, when the stakes are highest, they are the ones who step up. They are the ones who save the day, and they are the ones who deserve our respect. So the next time you meet someone who is quiet, don't assume they have nothing to say. Listen, watch, learn, because you never know who you are talking to, you never know what they have survived, and you never know when they might just save your life. If you found value in this story, please hit the like button. It's a small gesture, but it makes a big difference. It tells us that you care about these stories, and that encourages us to keep telling them. Alara's story doesn't end here. It continues. Every day, in every shift, in every decision, she is no longer the victim of her past. She is the master of her present, and she is the architect of her future. And that is the greatest victory of all. Before you go, consider watching our next video. It's a story about a janitor who uncovered a corporate fraud scheme. It's another tale of quiet competence meeting systemic corruption. You won't want to miss it. Click the link on the screen to watch now. Thank you for spending this hour with us. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing in the power of the underdog. We are the Code Whisperers, and we will see you in the next story. Remember, kindness costs nothing, respect costs nothing, but they mean everything. Carry that with you today. If you have a story idea you'd like to see adapted, send it to us via email. We love hearing from our audience. Your ideas inspire our scripts. Stay safe, stay kind, and stay curious. Wait, one more thing. Alara kept the pin. She wore it every day. And every time she looked at it, she remembered, not the pain, not the humiliation, but the moment she chose to act, the moment she chose to be seen.